Welcome everyone. It's kind of weird hosting a conversation like this on Zoom, but I mean, I still haven't quite gotten used to it. But anyway, my name is Nicolaj Reffstrup. I'm the founder of Ganni, a Copenhagen-based contemporary fashion label. And I'm here with Stine Kirstein Junge, that heads up the SDG Accelerator program at the UNDP. Welcome to you, Stine.
Yeah, hi.
And as you guys probably know, it's a no moderator conversation, so it's a new format for all of us. So please bear with us if we make mistakes. I mean, there's no one to save us here, and I cannot even kick Stine under the table if things go wrong. So we're not in the same office. Good thing though is that there's no one to stop us if we go over time. Anyway, we're planning for our chat to go on for 20 minutes, after which hopefully we should have around 10 minutes for questions and comments. So please submit questions or comments in the comment section during the session, and then one of our colleagues will pick a few questions for us to answer by the end. Real quick, to provide a bit of context, I'll just run you through a presentation of the case, and I'm actually reading this from my notes. So Ganni and the UNDP set out to create an impact-free collection. I'll get back to what that means. Fast forwarding the mapping of Ganni's supply chain and fabric choices in order to make radical change. We created the Ganni Lab project, a virtual team with team members from literally all parts of our organization that ran as a cross-departmental project for 12 months. All right, okay, let's get started, Stine. Could you, for a start, explain to us what the SDG Accelerator program is and how businesses can benefit from structuring their responsibility work around the SDGs?
Yes, I can. So I'll quickly introduce you to the program. The SDG Accelerator for SMEs is a new business innovation program in UNDP that has been developed and tested over the last 2 years with 32 small and medium-sized industrial companies from Denmark. So what we do in this program is that we provide a structured process to companies to work with the SDGs as strategic goals to grow their business. And when the companies have been programmed, they end up with a solid business plan ready for implementation. So the SDG Accelerator goes on corporate social responsibility and the classic risk reduction and compliance agenda. Instead, we see it as an export catalog for companies, and we approach the SDGs as market opportunities. So why do we do that? That's because the SDGs, as we see them, are a formulation of greatest challenges of our time, and this is also where we see the greatest needs of our time. So this is also where we need solutions. And who are good at coming up with solutions? That's the private sector, and especially small and medium-sized enterprises, because they are agile, they are innovative, and many of them are also very tech-savvy. So we're here to present or to discuss the case of Ganni. So I'll ask you, Nicolaj, now, how did Ganni work specifically with the SDG goal number 12 to achieve responsible consumption and production in this project?
Well, as we all know, supply chains are historically long and complex and super opaque. I mean, production takes place across multiple countries, and only few people really understand the true impact of that production. And that goes for us as well. So for a start, it was super important for us to set up this cross-departmental team that would map out and at least try to understand our own processes. But at the same time, we also wanted to expand our sense of ownership and educate everyone across departments. So it's about making our responsibility work an inherent part of how we do business. It has to be something you default to, not just a nice add-on or something that sits in a single department. So it kind of reminds me of how IT was 20 years ago. Back then you had these huge IT departments that would create and lead all tech projects, and you would go to them for help. But today, digitization has become an inherent part of all departments. It's imminent in what you do. So you wouldn't do anything in marketing or logistics or finance without considering how to digitize that process or problem. So we're trying to make the same thing happen for our responsibility effort, if that makes sense.
So actually, what Ganni has done is exactly what the SDG Accelerator has aimed for. So with establishing the Ganni Lab, Ganni has actually started a process of anchoring the SDGs at the core of their business and in the future strategy of their business. And that demands cooperation between different units. So when I work with Ganni, I work with people from design, production, communications, sustainability, and leadership. So it also demands a cooperation with the supply chain and many actors from the supply chain. So Ganni did not limit themselves to and their sustainability work with us to the sustainability unit. They went far beyond, and that can create a huge and truly transformational process in terms of working with sustainability. But now we talk about sustainable production and consumption level. I can't help asking you, how does Ganni handle the massive and growing pile of fashion waste and stock that ends up in landfills and is getting burnt?
Oh, I wish you hadn't asked that question. No, just kidding. Of course, it's a huge problem. And especially when you, as we do, acknowledge that you are a fashion brand. Like we create collections that don't just satisfy a functional need, like a basic piece of garment. What we do is also kind of cater for people's needs for aesthetically pleasing designs. It's raw consumption, basically. So that's why, at least hypothetically, we set out to create a fashion collection that left very little impact. It's easier with basics, but only if we manage to also create a fashion collection that does no harm or very, very little harm can we achieve full impact. We have a long way to go, and obviously to get there, you need to also consider how your product is consumed, as you were talking about here, and obviously where it ends up. So at Ganni, we're looking at 4 different strategies for that part of our business. So we have a take-back scheme that's already been implemented in most of our stores, where customers can return clothes that we then treat responsibly. We have launched Ganni Repeat, rental program that we're still tweaking to figure out what exactly does the customer need. We have a designing for circularity program going on, and we're exploring repair guarantee programs and other programs to ensure that we extend the lifetime of a product and to optimize the ways that we can recycle that product in the end. And then finally, obviously, we're also exploring re-commerce solutions where Ganni will either own the full resale process or facilitate a peer-to-peer transaction. So as I said, we still have a long way to go, but at least it shows that there are commercially viable solutions out there, which is super important, because in some of these cases, it seems that the consumer is interested in engaging and actually paying for this, especially re-commerce. They might just be there for a bargain on price, but that's totally fine with us. Because we know that if you pass on a dress to be worn by another person for another 9 months, then the impact of that product or garment is reduced by 30%. So whatever reason the consumer might have to buy that, it's cool with us. That's tangible change. So anyway, now we talk about change. Let's get back to the accelerator program. So the UNDP created the SDG Accelerator program as an accelerator program to create change, basically. So could you describe for us what goes into that process, and why do we talk about a sprint process? And especially, or most importantly, maybe, how do you ensure that it's not just words here?
Thank you for coming back on my question so thoroughly. I'll try to come back equally fine on this one. So I'll elevate myself a little bit and just say that as an overall, the SDG Accelerator for SME has 3 key components. So we do have the business innovation journey, and we do have the employee engagement component. And then we have a component called external communication, which is about communicating the company cases in traditional media and social media. So the business innovation journey is the most heavyweight component of the program, and we are working with management consultants to actually implement. And in the Danish case, we work with Monitor Deloitte. And we do that because this is not just talk. We need to work with the consultants that are able to develop a business. UNDP can't do that. I'll come back to that. So in the short term, the key objective with this innovation is the company use the model and the tools in the program, and then they create a minimum of one product, one service, or one business model that have some significant impact on the sustainable development goals. So we have some results, and I'll just share a little bit of them here. Again, emphasizing that this is not just words, but real results. So in 2018, we had 13 companies graduating, and 1/3 of these companies developed a prototype and sold it while we worked with them. I find that pretty amazing. Then
very cool.
The next third of the companies, they developed a prototype while we worked with them, and then the last 1/3 of the companies, they developed a solid business plan ready for implementation. So, as I mentioned before, the management consultants then the program to the commercial viability of the sustainable products and services that we are developing in the program. UNDP contribute with our knowledge to sustainable development. I'll do the last one here before I ask you a question. In the program, we actually created a structure for external communications, and by doing that, we are applying pressure on the companies to actually pull through on the commitments they've made with us in the program. And it really worked, because you do have these external expectations put on the companies, and also accountability demands, and it really made the companies work. So some of the features worked in the program. Of course, there were also some features that didn't, but this is also a pilot, so we picked up and learned. So talking about results, Nicolaj, what were the results of working with the Ganni Lab project in the SDG Accelerator, and how did you quantify these results?
Well, I totally recognize what you're talking about. Like a lot of the gain from a project like this you get from just putting objectives out there and being transparent about you do, and through that you kind of commit to a process. But if I kind of take one step back, then the idea for Ganni Lab came partly from Vattenfall, a Swedish company that produces green energy. So Vattenfall set out to build a carbon neutral baby crib, which is a pretty random product for them, but they just used this to serve as a case for them. So they went to extremes to get there, and in the end found that the production cost of that baby crib would be around $28,000 or something like that.
Oh my
but
God.
It would be carbon neutral. So inspired by that, partly inspired by that, we too wanted to create an impact neutral fashion collection at whatever cost, at least hypothetically. The bad thing is we didn't succeed in that, unfortunately, but I don't think at the moment it's possible at all. Good thing though is that we learned a lot through the process and found that most of those learnings kind of transitioned into our day-to-day business right away. It was kind of seamless actually, and probably because we had so many representatives from across the organization. So we focused on cotton, viscose, and polyesters as these are our kind of biggest volume fabrics. And then we decided to only use market-ready fabrics as they could be scaled right away. So as a result, we went from just 4% responsible fabrics when we started out to close to 73% in our latest Spring/Summer 21 collection, which is just over a 12-month process. So, and in the process, we also prioritize traceability. So we reached 75% traceability, which is kind of a weird concept to me at least, but that means that we got to the raw material stage. However, it was difficult getting further than that, especially working with recycled materials. It can be tough. And to kind of verify this and track it, we work with Quantis, which is a life cycle assessment provider. They kind of measured and validated our carbon footprint and all the data and the improvements we made. So it's important when you engage with a project like this that you make yourself aware that this is going to cost you money. I mean, there's no free ride or free lunch, and you cannot pass the cost on to the consumer. She's not ready to pay a premium yet. So, for instance, we found that responsible fabrics are typically 8 to 10% more expensive than conventional ones, but sometimes up to 3 times the cost of a conventional fabric if you want to use like very innovative, super interesting new materials. But else than that, we also spend a lot of money on workshops, courses, software tools, the team, certifications, consultants, etc. We work directly with 11 different suppliers, and we probably spent more than 150,000 euro just kind of in direct expenses, and add to that like salaries and a bit of capex. So it's not a free ride. Anyway, we're kind of running out of time, so I'll jump to my last question for you, and that's about the SMEs. So why did the UNDP decide to engage in the accelerator program with the SMEs and not the big guys?
Yeah, so we engage with the SMEs because the large companies, they are already engaged in this agenda and they do have much more resources than SMEs. So SMEs need support. And also SMEs, they constitute 90% of all companies in the world, even more. And they play a very critical role in terms of creating jobs and livelihoods. And of course, that matters a lot to UNDP. And it also matters a lot if you want to reach the SDGs by 2030. So this program is for SMEs. And then there is another thing that's key to UNDP when we work with SMEs, and that is to create open source SDG business solutions that have a systemic impact. And that means that the solutions that companies are creating can be implemented by, across the entire sector, and it just doesn't matter only for one company. So that's why open sourcing is so important to accelerate change. And that is something that the Ganni Lab will also do. It will share open source, hopefully to spread across the sector. So third point is that UNDP has done a pilot with the SDG Accelerator. And when UNDP does like that, or make pilots, we want to scale. And we're present in 170 countries and territories in the world. And there has been a great level of interest from our country offices and governments around the world. So at the moment, we're rolling out globally and have a pilot in Moldova and one in Bosnia. And we're building one in Kuwait. And there's a lot of more interest in our team, sector-specific accelerator coming up in Denmark in 2021. So, and then I want to finish off by saying that I really want to encourage you guys to come to us if you want to do an SDG accelerator in your own country or in your own industry, for example, the fashion industry. And Nicolaj and I, we see great potential in that.
I love that, Stine. That's super cool. I guess that just to encourage everyone out there, guys, if you'd like the UN Accelerator program to come to your country, please reach out to Stine directly and explain to her why she should prioritize your country right away. It's super cool, and I think it would be extremely helpful for a lot of like small and mid-sized companies to get started on the process, getting like the blue stamp from the UN, but also access to some of the resources you guys have. Okay, we're slowly running out of time, but before we jump to a few of the questions we've had, we should probably just sum up the key takeaways from our conversation. You still have time to submit more questions or comments if you want to, so please shoot. Stine, will you have a go at the first one?
Yeah, I'm sharing my screen now. Just a second, because I think you guys should have the takeaways. Should we put them up? Did I share them now? Can you see them?
I'm not seeing anything so far.
No. Okay, but let me look at the questions then. So Let me see. Maybe, is there a question at all?
Oh yeah, there are a question from Danielle.
Okay, maybe
Danielle,
you can read it out.
I can do that for sure. Which team department undergoes the biggest transformation during the process towards more sustainability? Which department worked most intensely on reaching your goals? Very good question.
Yeah, it's a good question, and if it's directly for Ganni, I think you're the one to answer. But because it's actually been very different departments in the different companies in the program that have carried out the last of the work. Most companies leading the program, they have and I think people have the hardcore experience with this from within Ganni.
Yes, I'm afraid we have a little bit of a problem with your sound sometimes. So I'll no worries. I'll try to answer it. So as mentioned, I think it's extremely important to kind of gather all stakeholders in the process, internal stakeholders. So we have representatives from literally all departments. However, having said that, I think production sourcing still bears the bulk of the grundle, along with the responsibility team, obviously, because there's a lot of firstly, because more than 80% of our carbon footprint, for instance, is derived from the actual product, like 2/3 directly from the fabric. Sorry, 80% from the product. Now you're on the screen, and more than 2/3 from the actual fabric. So there's a lot of work that goes on to working directly with your suppliers and identifying fabrics that make sense. There's also a lot of work that goes into mapping and validating the data, and so obviously also the responsibility department has a huge job ahead of them. But having said that, in a fashion company, obviously everything starts with the design team. So if they aren't trained at kind of designing for circularity, and if they aren't involved very, very early on in the process, you kind of get nowhere. So they need to be extremely involved in the process also. So my key takeaway would be that those three teams would bear the bulk of the work load here. All right, we have the 5 key takeaways here on the slide that Stine just shared. Would you go through the first one then?
Yes, so first key takeaway is that we recommend that you structure your work around the SDGs. They are a worldwide acknowledged language and a framework or system to work with.
Got it. And key takeaway number 2 is from my point of view, thoroughly map your supply chain to truly understand where you have the biggest challenges, but also where you can make the biggest impact for the least investment, because we're busy. We need to go for the low-hanging fruits, all of us. And on top of that, create virtual teams that work across departments to make sure that knowledge diffuses throughout the entire organization seamlessly. I can also add to the next one, key takeaway number 3, if you get the chance, if the accelerator program should come to your country, use it as an opportunity to facilitate change and apply pressure on yourself through external commitments, as both Stine and I talked about earlier on. And then key takeaway number 4, which is also close to my heart, you need to be willing to invest, because companies that dive into sustainability need to pay. Don't wait for the consumer to pick up the tab.
And then the final number 5 key takeaway is that we recommend that you make your work open source to create learning and transparency in the entire industry, and especially between small and medium-sized enterprises, as this is exactly where you can make the biggest impact. Do we have time for more questions, or?
Yeah, we should have time for a couple more questions. So
lovely.
There's a question on where can we see the results of your product or the product in your current collections. And as I mentioned in the beginning, we actually wanted to create one collection that was impact-free. However, it turned out that a lot of the learnings from the process kind of diffused into the rest of the organization and became part of our day-to-day operations quite fast. So it didn't make sense in the end. But what you can see is that for instance, we just launched our software collection, which is a jersey leisure wear collection. It's a new category for us. And the fabric source for this project came directly from Ganni Lab, from the Ganni Lab project. It's made from 100% recycled materials. As I mentioned before, we reached 75% traceability across this collection. So it was just great to see that we could take the knowledge that we gained over the course of the Ganni Lab project or the Accelerator program, extracted it from that process and implemented it directly in the way we do business. So that's one example. And overall, as I mentioned, currently we are at 75% of our collection or the fabrics we use that are certified or either organic or recycled. So that's one example. There's a question also on where and how can I contact the SDG Accelerator program?
Yes.
Good question.
Yeah, so we have a webpage. It's called sdg-accelerator.org. And you can also contact me. My name and phone number, email, etc. is on the web. Or reach out to Nicolaj. Get in contact with us as well.
DM me, yeah.
I will put, yeah, I don't know if I could share with everybody here. I don't think I can.
All right, we have time for one more question, and I think the most important one is that, or it's a combination of two questions. What is an impact-free collection? Is it actually achievable, or was it more of a marketing statement? So impact-free, I think it's up to you to kind of define what it is, what it means for you. So in our case, as I mentioned, or as we talked about earlier on, we prioritized 3 SDGs, number 5, gender equality, number 12, which is responsible production and consumption, and number 13, which is climate action. So when we define what impact-free means to us, we would kind of center those objectives around those 3 SDGs. However, impact-free was an internal kind of working title for us. It was more of a hypothesis that we could work towards. It was a big ambition that we all knew we probably wouldn't achieve. So no, it was definitely not a marketing statement. It was never meant to be mentioned externally. I hope that answers that question. And no, I'm afraid not at the moment. For a fashion product, I don't think it's actually achievable. It might be for a basic product, like a basic tee, but for fashion product, we still got quite a way to go. But there's a lot of super innovative product popping up at the moment, from like circular systems or Evernew, and like please do follow all of those super dynamic startups that are developing progressive new materials. The whole new material science is a super exciting field at the moment.
I can add to what Nicolaj said. So just one comment, because we had several dialogues around this, and I think Nicolaj put it quite well one day when he said that doing the Ganni Lab and within this program was actually creating in Ganni that you don't have because you're an SME and doesn't have that type of resources. So I think that was on the or created there.
That's a good wrap up. To cut it short, we use the SDG Accelerator program as your outsourced R&D department. If you don't have the internal resources, which we didn't have. All right. time's up. Although we don't have a moderator, we still need to get going. Thank you so much for participating, Stine, and thank you to Copenhagen Fashion Summit for hosting us. It's been a real pleasure. And please, guys out there, feel free to reach out to Stine or me if you have any questions. That's all.
So,
Thanks,
thank
guys.
you for today. Hi.
Bye-bye.